yell at me every once in a while. It's not loud enough.
I think I can bump the mic down a lot.
Yeah, okay, let's try that.
Try to at least. Turn the mic back on.
I thought I did. Is it on? Yeah, it's on. Okay. Okay, yeah, that's sounding okay in the back? Yeah, great. So yeah, you start as an apprentice, you become a journeyman, and eventually you become a master. And to understand where I'm coming from, I'm a mediocre programmer in several languages and not really a good one in any of them. And I know a great deal about an awful lot of Linux topics. So I'm a voluntary and very happy jack of all trades, and the flip side of that is master of none. And I don't get bored. Not to imply that mastery is equal to boredom, but it's a personal choice. So the obligatory XKCD. I will give you a moment. Great deal about an awful lot of Linux topics. So I'm a voluntary and very happy jack of all trades, and the flip side of that is master of none. And I don't get bored. Not to imply that mastery is equal to boredom, but it's a personal choice. So the obligatory XKCD, which I will give you a moment. Still working on it? All right. So, first of all, before we do this, I am going to say that if you're using Emacs, I'm not interested in that flame war. I am very much in favor of people using what works for them. So, does anybody here use Atom? Oh, cool. That's good. How about Emacs? Yep. Get him! Well, before you say that, at least they have a real programming language in their editor. We have one. I'm not sure it's real.
We also have Evil Mode.
Hmm?
We also have Evil Mode. So you get the best of your world and our world.
I'm not sure it's the best, but okay. Let's go down the list. So, Pico Nano. Anybody here? Only two. Okay. That one I'm not going to mock, but you might want to consider learning something, say, VI, Emacs, Atom, because you don't get as much power. I mean, it's good for quick edits, but I've told him that because he's my coworker. So, anybody using Vim? Okay, how about NeoVim? No one. Oh, interesting. Okay. And anyone on other editors? What have we got?
Sublime Text.
Yeah, okay. In the back?
Text Wrangler.
Oh yeah, okay, cool. So if you haven't tried Atom, I would suggest you give it at least a bit of a look. It's graphical only and it's massive, but it is really interesting and it's readily extensible. So I think it's worth a quick look. So I'm going to read this off or not, but you get the general idea. The idea here is to talk about a bunch of different things relating to Vim to hopefully trigger things that interest you and that you will want to follow up on. The first one I'm going to talk about is NeoVim. This, what do I got here? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so this is really interesting stuff. The good embedded terminal is a major plus. There is a plugin that will give you a terminal in regular Vim. It's pretty crap. I've had a lot of problems with it. I didn't like it. The one in NeoVim I have never, ever had a problem with. Also, there is one bit of weirdness I kind of wish they'd fix. If you create a terminal inside NeoVim and then type nvim and try to edit something, it creates an instance inside itself instead of jumping out to the parent process. Yeah, it's only, if you go looking for it, you're going to find that it's only at something like 0.1.6. I have now been using it as pretty much my only editor for about 6 months and have had no problems whatsoever. And in all seriousness, it's immensely better than Vim, and I think you should jump ship right now. And it's not exactly jumping ship either, because the word is that, well, it took a major fork for Bram Moolenaar to notice, Bram Moolenaar being the maintainer of Vim. But apparently he is going to be merging this into the main line. So around version 8, you're going to get all the goodies if you just want to wait. But I think it's worth going right now. So I'm just going to run over this pretty quickly because there are some quirks about installing Vim on various machines. What it boils down to is that VI is almost always installed on any system. It's one of the advantages of the editor. But if you want more power, the better version, go with Vim. And that usually requires another package. So let's see. And on Debian-based systems, including Ubuntu, I believe you just need to install vim. CentOS, yum install Vim enhanced. Yeah, if you're using a Mac, the OS X version that's built in is lacking a lot of features. You can either use Mac Vim, which is quite good but graphical, and I actually prefer console. And in that case, what you can do is brew install. And if you have to use it on Windows, I would recommend Cream. It will smooth out some of the issues. It may also insist on you being in insert mode all the time, but that turns out to be fairly easy to toggle back, and I found it easier to install that and revert that little feature than to try and go with one of the other installers. So mostly I'd just be reading this off. Basically, it's everywhere. It's incredibly powerful. This is why you should use it. It's kind of what's wrong with it. A very old joke, but they tend to stick around because they're accurate. The learning curve is utterly brutal. And I should point out, having said all of these bad things, that NeoVim is not about to fix the nasty programming language. They have implemented with all the flaws. So it's completely compatible. Which also means that all of your plugins, your syntax files, everything will continue to work. So, is there anybody here that actually used ed or x? Wow, I'm impressed.
User.
And again, I'm just going to let you read through that, which probably mostly covered it. The main point is that history plays a big part in Vim because it's insanely old. And it was developed out of an even older editor than that, which is X. And ed is where the regex that you continue to use now in VI started. So there we go through to X. And VI itself arrived in 1976. And I just wanted to ask for a show of hands, who here is younger than Vim? That's what I kind of thought. But what you get from that history and that length of time is incredible power because we've been adding to it. This has disadvantages, of course, because you get kitchen sink syndrome. This is also some history for you. Bill Joy was working on a Lear Siegler, and it had the little arrow keys in those places. He thought, okay, that's fine, we'll use those. So that's why you've got HJKL. So mostly, I'm not going to go into the basics of modal editing, just to point out that not only do we have normal and insert, we've also got visual, command line, and operator pending. And honestly, operator pending, I am still trying to get my head around. So there are a lot of modes, and you need to know that as we work through this. There's the question, hands up if you have used any syntax other than the defaults. This is something I would kind of recommend. It does get very garish. On the other hand, it's incredibly useful. I think there are a few people out there who are seriously hardcore about their Vim and want to use it in black and white. I'm like, no, thank you. I'll take the syntax highlighting. It helps me know what's going on. Now, having said all that, there is one huge caveat, which is very frustrating to me. Let's get back. Which is that if you have multiple buffers open on different files, you can only have one color scheme on all those buffers. And I haven't timed this out, or I haven't put the stuff in the right place, but basically, I like to use different color schemes with different types of code. And if you've got different types open in different buffers, you're still stuck with one color scheme. So you've got to choose which one you want at any given time. So again, I will show a URL for these slides at the end, and I'm not going to, if you want to track these down, it'll be easy to get the slides. One I haven't mentioned here and probably should have is Solarize. This is apparently very popular. I hate it, but it is a color scheme that's used in other places, and someone created a matching Vim scheme. So if that's your thing, it's out there. And yes, you can even write your own. I've done it, not complex color schemes, but enough to highlight certain lines just because it's got a set of, 3 arrows at the beginning. I wanted that highlighted. It marks a particular line in the file, and it's worked quite well. So this is a very handy website. I would highly recommend that if you go visit it, unless you're running an i7, use Chrome. I love Firefox. I use it every day. It dies on this because it is opening up something like 250 instances of the file, each one with a different color scheme to show you what it looks like. And it's great for picking your color schemes, and you can choose between this is HTML and Java and C, and so whatever you're working with, they probably got it, and you can check which color schemes you like. This I'm going to speed through. This is a Linux thing, does not apply to Windows or Mac. And if you are having this problem, and believe me, you will know, because it looks incredibly ugly, then come check out the slides. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. This is just some stuff you have to put in, etc. profile and your vimrc. And I should point out here, Debian and Ubuntu have different values. One's a dash and the other's a plus or something like that. It'll handle both of them. I can't guarantee it for Fedora-based ones. I'm not sure about them. Ah, yes, tab completion. So do people use Vim like :E to edit a file and then tab complete a name? Anybody do that? Have you set this?
No, but I can see what now.
Yeah, because Vim has this utterly horrible tab completion mode where if you type, say, a single letter and then you hit tab, which, you know, in Bash would be perfectly sane because it would show you all the matches. When you hit tab again, it just shows the next file name, and tab, the next file name. If you've got 500, that's how you're getting through all 500 of them. It will drive you absolutely batty. So, wild mode, longest equals list, it will now do bash-like tab completion and show you all the available matches. It's a lot better. Oh yeah, and :help wild mode is also good if you need to know more about it. So who here has edited their vimrc file? Okay, keep it in a repo. You're going to change it a lot. It's going to be bloody huge if you start working with it at all. Most of the stuff you're going to edit will end up in there initially. It turns out that Vim has a huge directory structure under the .vim folder in your home directory, and a lot of this stuff will eventually, if you keep increasing the size of vimrc, get divided out into those files to make the whole arrangement more sane. And we'll get to that a little bit later. And one of my favorite topics, mappings. Yeah, one of my favorite traps is with Vim is that map is recursive, which means that if you have something mapped a single letter and it is part of your next mapping, it will try and go through that other mapping as well, which is why you always use no remap. In this case, N means for normal mode, and if you're working in insert mode, it's I no remap. This particular one, map leader. Do I have a good explanation of map leader? Because that's a fun one. Basically, you're telling Vim, I want to use this one character as an introduction to all of my mapped commands. Not all, but your own written set, whatever. And I chose dash because it's very easy for a Dvorak user. If you're using QWERTY, you probably want to go with semicolon. And there is a slight disadvantage to dash, which I've only discovered recently. If you don't type quickly, after about 2 seconds, dash goes, okay, you're not doing a mapping, I'm going to do my normal behavior, which is to exit your file and go back to the current directory file listing. Wait, what? So that was kind of bizarre. So I'm going to do a quick teardown on this -EV. As I said, it's in normal mode. And what it means is that I used to do, not as much anymore, but I was constantly editing my vimrc. So I wanted to be able to edit it quickly. So -EV is edit vimrc. And that means run this command, :tab drop. Now, that means create a new tab for this unless the file is already open. So tab new would open a new file regardless, and you could have vimrc open in 3 different places. Tab drop says jump to the already open instance if it is already open. $myvimrc is one of the built-in variables, and then a carriage return. This one, you will see about 1 million instances of ugly stuff like this online, and I should have taken this out or changed it, because the concept here is you want to memorize your location within the file. That's what about that up to there is. And then go to the top and re-indent the entire file. And then this part here is go back to exactly where I was. None of these work terribly well. They're off by a line, or your cursor's in the wrong place on the line, or something like that. There are load view and save view commands now in Vim, which replace all this and make it a lot easier. So that's not a great example. Sorry about that. So, yeah, :help subject will get you help. It tends to be of the variety that it's completely comprehensible once you know what it means, which is more or less like a man page. Some of it is good, so you should give it a try, but sometimes you will find yourself getting back out and going out to Google. So, who here has a good hold on the whole idea of buffers? Not many people. I may not be the best person to explain it. The buffer is any file a buffer is any file that you have open. And you can move between them. Now, this would be normal Vim behavior. If you open multiple files on the command line, each one is opened in a buffer. And this is how Vim expects you to operate. And there are ways to move between the buffers. The reason I'm not a huge fan of buffers is because you actually have to save them before you exit them. Of course, this is Vim, there's an override for even that. But since they are, I think of them as being almost invisible. I prefer tabs where I've got an indicator. We're still on buffers. Tabs allow you indicators of each file and whether or not they have been modified, and you can move between them even if they are modified. There are managers like Mini-Buff Explorer if you want to install those to help you deal with them. And we still have more buffer. No, there's tabs. So this is a more common model in most editors, and you've already seen that I use it with tab drop. So you've got tab new and tab drop. Now, tab drop I really like. It is not installed by default on all versions of Linux. It's very weird, and sometimes you have to install GNOME Vim to get it in the command line version. So, if in doubt, you can use tab new. So this is one of my favorite jokes. Vim has its own package management system. So anybody who's making the joke about how Emacs is a great operating system, it's too bad it doesn't have a good editor, should stop and look at their own editor, because it's getting pretty big and it's trying to take over a bunch of stuff. So I've chosen to use Bundle. It works really nicely. Basically, you add a single line in your VimRC for each plugin you want, and it is usually a pointer to GitHub, and if it's on GitHub, you don't even have to name GitHub, you just give the end of the URL, the directories. And then you use bundle install. And Pathogen requires you to do a bit more work with actually having to go into your file system and do a git clone into your directory, whereas bundle handles that for you. So best is in quotes because these are the ones I've tried and liked, usually on other people's recommendations, but there are thousands more out there. Airline I will show you a bit more of later on. It basically makes the editor look nicer. Git gutter is the one I'm using. I would recommend, I think, that if you are just getting started, I should explain what it is first. If you are editing code that is in a Git repository, Git gutter provides just a bar down the side of the editor, 2 columns, and it shows you what lines are added, where there's been something subtracted, or if something's been modified. Signify does pretty much the same thing, but it covers just about any DCS or distributed version control system. So it's probably the better option. If you're only using Git, which I suppose a lot of us are these days, it's going to be good enough. I've really liked it. Fugitive allows you to do all your Git-like stuff inside Vim. I tried it. I was not crazy about it. I prefer to go out to command line and handle it there. But if you think you want to do all of your Git inside Vim, it might be worth a shot. Tag list and tag bar. They require C tags, and they show you the tags for your current program. OpenRel is one that's turned out to be incredibly useful to me. I do a lot of HTML editing, and it allows you. Vim has a built-in command, gf. If you put it on top of a file name and type gf, it will try and open that file. And that works great until you get into HTML, where the base for the file system that the HTML thinks it's dealing with has nothing to do with your local file system. OpenRel lets you say, the base of my HTML is here, and then I want to open this file relative to that location. Control P I have never used, but of all of these that I'm mentioning, this one probably gets the most love online. It's a fuzzy finder for files, buffers, and tags. So it's apparently very good. Now, there are lots of language-specific plugins. I mentioned Jedi Vim in part because I originally did this talk for Python group, and in part because it's a language I use, and because you really don't want to use Python. We're going to skip Superman. That's kind of crazy. Man pages inside Vim. If you really like your Vim commands, you can do that. VimWiki is kind of neat. It creates, well, a wiki inside of Vim. It stores the file in a subfolder of your home directory. And I found it fairly convenient. Conch shell is the thing I mentioned quickly before. It allows terminals inside of Vim. It's not terribly stable, and if you go to NeoVim, you'll be a lot better off. And the same thing applies to Terminus. Terminus supports a lot of things. For me, the biggest deal was mouse integration in Vim. Again, NeoVim already has that, so I would recommend going that way. So Airline, probably my favorite plugin. This is what you get from it mostly is the status bar, now in graphical colors, very loud. If it's modified, this is purple. Normal mode versus insert mode, and integration with git gutter. So +6 lines, 2 modified, 2 subtracted. Airline does have a significant caveat.